Greetings, brothers and sisters. So I had a realization that involves the Heartfulness cult, dodgy scam channel, and just all of this stuff to do with heartfulness. And the realization came when I forgot about Babaji's birthday, and I, made a quick video for the Gratefulness meditation, and then I felt like I had to look at the Heartfulness YouTube channel. And it had been 2.5 months since I had looked at the YouTube channel. I hadn't even thought about it. And when I looked at it, it so drained my energy, and it's so toxic. And it was such a bummer for me. Like, I didn't realize how much of a bummer it was for me. And I kind of knew, what originally happened when I broke free from Dodgy and the Heartfulness cult. I said to people, please don't send me things for Dodgy, any kind of stuff that's going on the Heartfulness YouTube channel. I don't need to know about it. I just want to do my own thing and eventually do what has now become Gratefulness meditation. And it's not my own thing. And I'll explain what I now believe that happened, a better way to articulate what happened. We'll come back to that. But, it was just that I didn't want to see this stuff because, this is how I am about anything this is how I was with my ex, once I knew it was over. And, this sense of relief. And we had some, things to work out, the divorce and things like that, some things to do with the kids. But, I couldn't wait for the day when we didn't have any contact at all. I'm not attracted to poison. Like when somebody or something's toxic to me and I realize that person or that thing is bad for me. And it's clear, some things are, it's a mixture of both things, right? Some people are good for you, but not all the time. Sometimes, whatever. But when it's very clear that something like, my ex and now the Heartfulness organization and Dodgy are toxic to me. They hurt me. They're hurting my spiritual progress. They're draining my energy and things. I don't want anything to do with them, right? Why would I? And so, when I was able to finally break free fully from my ex, I don't think about her. I'm still finishing up this journey series thing, but, I don't want to make any sort of contact with the person. And, for my own betterment. And, there's people who, they stalk their exes on social media or family members, or, they, once in a while, they think about somebody, they want to see how they're doing, or, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but for me, it just, I don't have that, right? I just, I have no interest in it. But, after a while, stuff happened with Heartfulness that I needed to hear and I needed to share with other people. I knew Dodgy, when I experienced the transmission, it was a Basant gathering, and I experienced the transmission on the Basant gathering in 2023, and I knew it wasn't Dodgy that was transmitting, and I wasn't feeling anything from him and the other gathering. I was like, oh yeah, it's over. I was just, that's all I needed to experience. For me, I didn't need any other convincing, but there are some things other people had to hear, and other people who were, did Heartfulness for a while, and I was the provider of information. And then there's the Abhyasis who maybe were a little bit resistant, but they needed somebody to articulate how they were feeling. And so I hung in there based in, basically it was my duty to do that, right? There's videos I make because I want to make them, videos that I make because I enjoy making them. But all these videos come from a sense that, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Whatever it is that I'm being guided by my heart, the stuff that I do, that I've learned through the Sajmarg system of meditation, and now, what we call gratefulness. And so, there was this thing that had been on my mind that out of duty I was supposed to do, which was, I had all this information. I was an expert on the collapse. The premier foremost expert on Dodgy and the collapse of the Sajmarg, the Heartfulness system, and what he's, the bastardization of Sajmarg into Dodgy's cult, right? I knew what I saw. Plus I was, I did this for a living. I knew how to make videos like this. It was tailor-made for this thing. And it was personal to me. And so it was information that I felt it was my duty to share, but I was resisting it. Like I kept on putting it off, and of course I have the other videos on my other channel, my channels that are the videos that pay, the bills and all these things. But finally, I broke down, and I just felt like I needed to do it. I made these videos, and Dodgy and Heartfulness copyrighted me, and I got copyright strikes. And so, really, at that point, I mean, it really wasn't much I could do because all the evidence and proof was in his own, videos and things like that. And I started this other channel, the Exposing Heartfulness Cult Dodgy Scam channel. And, I just, there was just not a lot of Abiasis. There was two people that were Abiasis who were struggling. And they were grateful that I put the content up. And that was nice, and two people is still two people, I don't do things for numbers. But the majority of people watching the videos are people from my other channels. And they don't really care. Some of them have gone through the Heartfulness thing, but they already know Dodgy sucks. And so there's no real point to the channel. And what I've realized tonight, the best way to articulate this, coming back to this, what I was saying earlier, is that, it seems like the Heartfulness organization, Sajmark transitioned into Heartfulness, and I left Heartfulness. Like, that's how these people see it. Dodgy's people and the people who are, loyal to Dodgy. But what I see is that there was a Sajmark system, and Dodgy created this parasitic, like, holding company as a scam to, whatever it was, all the things he's doing, enriching himself, all the things that, perverted things that he's doing to the, the foundation of the Sajmark system. But Heartfulness is not the same thing. In fact, it's the opposite of Sajmark. And so Dodgy and all the people have left Sajmark behind. And, at least for me and maybe, whoever else, I mean, there's people who are sort of, they're straddling the fence. They see Dodgy as a scammer, like the Dodgy Truther, but they're still a part of the organization, right? And so very few people have broken free from this, but also have retained Sajmark. And I don't know how many people have done that. And then other people, that have done the Gratefulness adaptation now. But Dodgy and all the people who have followed him over have left Sajmark behind. They're doing something now called Heartfulness, and it's nothing like Sajmark. It's the opposite. And I don't respect or like any of those people. People who you have something in common with. I mean, the thing that, that bonded any of us that all did Sajmark was the system and the relationship to the master, and we were all very passionate about it. But we might have very little in common after that, right? Like some people we had a little bit more in common, to others, less. But we had this one thing that we all shared. But we don't share that anymore. And for most of these people, I mean, I wasn't close to them and certainly don't like them. But I look at them as like almost, it's actually worse than this, but it's like they've cheated on Chargy with Dodgy. Chargy died, and they allowed Dodgy to throw him under the bus and, disrespect him and destroy the system that Babaji built. And they're all supporting Dodgy, so these people are less than worthless. Like, these are the people I most dislike and disrespect, I mean, have no respect for in the whole planet. I mean, they're worse than anybody else. Like, to me, they're worse than, Jeffrey Epstein or like, Trump and Biden and, mass murder. I mean, the worst people in the world, they're worse than that because of how important the Sajmark system is, how much charge he did for them, and how easy they quit on it all and followed this, this dope into the abyss, right? And so I want nothing to do with them and Dodgy and the system. And so, I felt like I was obligated to cover this, but there's very few views on this channel. And, these dopey Heartfulness people showed up and left comments. And, like, I just don't want them watching my videos. I don't want them connecting with me. I did the same thing when all these people, including Dodgy, showed up in my Journey series, and I told them all to go away. That these videos weren't for them. I'm taking the Heartfulness and all these things out of the title. But, I don't want to connect with them, right? And having a YouTube channel with Heartfulness in the title is me connecting with them. And I don't want it. I don't want to connect with Dodgy. I don't want to connect with any of these people. They're people I, have no interest in having any sort of connection or relationship with. And so, I'm spread a little thin because ever since I started doing these dodgy videos, I'm doing too much, operating now 4 YouTube channels and keeping, apprised of all of them and, all of it. Plus the fact that they've copyrighted me, all this stuff. But the biggest thing is I just don't want any connection with them. And, all these people who did Saj Marg and have watched Dodgy throw Chargy under the bus and these things, they're not, they might watch my videos and maybe some seeds of doubt, but I don't even like these people. I'm not trying to help them. It was my duty to do the videos. I felt like it was something that I had to do. But the reason why I didn't want to do it was I kind of knew this was going to happen. But it was something I just had to do anyway. And there were a couple people that were affected positively, and maybe some more that never talked, never left comments and, just lurked. And those people suck anyway, you know what I mean? Those, people who benefited but didn't have the courage to speak up or at least even privately reach out to me and thank me or whatever. Those people are worthless. So the bottom line is, I just can't do it anymore, and I'm just so grateful to be disconnected. So I'm changing the name of the channel to Pockets of the Future Backup Channel. I'll eventually put some content up there and get subscribers, whatever it is. I'm gonna get it monetized, not subscribers, and get it monetized, and there'll be a backup channel, and I can attend to it later, but I just don't want anything to do with Heartfulness. I'm so relieved with this, and it brings it to a conclusion, right? Because it's how I felt after. It's the third time that I felt this way. The first time was when they were watching my videos, and the Journey series went up from 2,000 to 3,000 views, to some of them had 9,000 views, and those 6,000 views were Abiasis and Dodgy and people like it. And I got bombarded by both people who hated Dodgy and pro-Dodgy people, and I just didn't like any of them. And I felt like they were putting me in the middle of something that, it has nothing to do with me. I can't really, be a part of any of that. I was just having my own personal reaction to what was going on with Heartfulness. But then, I told everyone to leave the channel, and I changed the titles, and I was free from all that. And then, the thing happened with me leaving Heartfulness completely and realizing I could connect to the Divine Master without this burden of the Heartfulness system. And then doing the Gratefulness meditation, which has been great. It's been wonderful. And so, I wanted to be disconnected again, but then there were some unresolved things, and, the stuff happened with his on the gathering where, he lied about Babaji intercommuning with him and canceling 2 of the gatherings. And, there's this one Chargy gathering coming up. I have to, bite the bullet and look into that, and I'll mention it somewhere. I'll make a short video on some channel or another. I don't know which one. And I'll reference it in the Journey series. But either way, I'm done. The channel is, I'm not, I don't feel like it's my duty to do this. If anybody's dumb enough as a new person to fall for Dodgy and the Heartfulness cult, then my videos aren't going to stop that kind of level of stupidity, right? And the people who are already, who are allowed Dodgy to smear Chargy and disrespect him, all these people, those people are, they have no value to anybody, right? Their weakness and their, all the things that Chargy did for him. I've talked about these people over and over again. And I don't want anything to do with them, right? And so, I'm just that kind of a person when, something's over and I realize it's toxic towards me. It has a negative effect on me. I just want to get rid of all connections and sever all ties. And people have been aware of some of the things that happened with my channel and certainly with my ex. And I just, it always gives me a sense of relief. And so that's what's up. The name's going to be changed. It's going to be a backup channel. And then I'll, deal with all that stuff later. And so I'm going to put this video up. I've made all but one video I released today. I'm going to make that, or yesterday. I'm going to release this on Sunday. Today's Saturday, May 4th, but this video is going to be made public tomorrow. And then I'm going to make all the changes tomorrow. And then the rest of it. But, it's a really good thing. I'm pretty psyched. Okay, so it's Sunday, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, for those people who live in the western, southwestern part of the country. Anyways, not really all that important. So I made this video last night, the audio, but good meditation, good night's sleep, feel a lot better about everything. So I wanted to add a few things to it. I want this thing to be comprehensive. It's going to be the sort of last video on this channel. Then I'll make another video about how the channel's going to be my backup channel, and then I'll make some more content when I go to get it monetized again, which I'm not going to do in the near future. Like, I just need to take a break from the whole 4-channel thing. But what I want to say here is that one of the things these are things I already know, but I just want to say these things again. I've already said. When you go through a reconciliation process, there's a loss here. For those of us who are Abiyasis, who love this system, and the system's important to us all, and realize that Daji's not a master. Like, he's failed to be. He's taken the thing and turned it into something else, right? And so when you realize that, you have to go through something, and we all go through something, to sort of reconcile it and figure out, what do we do and what could happen, and, what are the options, right? And so, I've known since the beginning that the options of getting rid of Daji somehow and fixing the system are not on the table, because Daji isn't the only person that has failed here. It's like every Abiyasi failed in some way. Like the Daji becoming the master of the system is a failure of the Abiyasis. It was a situation where anybody put in, was just the successor to Charji, was going to fail because corruption and, just all these negatives and the lack of people appreciating what it is, the system. There was no way this wasn't going to happen. When I realized that, I was cool with it, because, Daji's just doing what, anybody in that position would end up doing. Like, his might be worse, he might be stupider, like he has some, issues personally that make him, a specific way or another, but, no matter what happened, this was going to happen, right? Because it was already happening under Charji. Like, it was already happening. The UN was an example of that. As Charji got older and he started to delegate, he was micromanaging everything. We started to delegate. These guys all started to put their particular egotistical, non-Sahaj Marg fingerprints on the mission. They were making decisions that were leading Sahaj Marg astray. And I'm going to reread this message here. This is Friday, January 21st, 2010 a.m. Masters across the ages have left a teaching that has illuminated the wise, helped those who inspired to be so, and only slightly touched a certain number of others without giving the least results. These teachings were often misunderstood, distorted, and used for the purpose of power over others. They became religions with heavy structures, domineering, and a certain exploitation of the weakest. That is what we must avoid at all costs in the missions for future times. The same patterns must not be repeated. My son is restructuring the mission is for him to put in place a system that cannot degenerate by allowing the desire of power of certain individuals to be unleashed, individuals who are tempted to institute strict regulations that are not really in line with the teachings we give you. The method is very simple. Nothing must come to weigh down what exists. To structure, yes, but not transform in the wrong direction. It is the power of a few people that has provoked a good many of dramas in the past and continues to do so. Don't forget it. Humans are to be feared. We are afraid that this path, with all its riches, may not in the future be used as it should. Effective barriers will have to be put up to avoid potential drifts. This is our concern for the present and the future. My son must choose his collaborators judiciously. Many are full of goodwill, but that is not sufficient. Some would like to innovate to draw attention to themselves, which is dangerous. He must remain vigilant and surround himself with a few advisors whom he and whom he and we fully trust. The mission is about to reach an important turning point. Nothing must be left to chance. We are guiding him and assisting him in the heavy task with all the love and the trust we have in him. Transmit all this to him, my daughter Babaji. So those people were already around Chargy, and they were already trying to implement these things, and the UN was like one of the first things, and whatever else was happening. And, this was, they're manipulating maybe the outcome of who he was going to choose as master and sabotaging his first choice. And, and I don't have any faith that that guy would have been any better given my, limited interaction with him. And so, um, again, I don't know. But given the circumstances, I feel like this was going to happen. And so I believe it's part of a plan, some horrible thing that the mission had to go through. And those of us who lived through it, it's a bummer. Those of us who are real Abiasis and appreciated the system for what it is. But in reality, Daji's the legitimate master and president of the system. He has all the power. And so it's up to him to make a successor. And I can't imagine he'll do a good job. But, who's to say? Maybe, despite him, someone who a quality person will follow him. But the issue here is that the line of masters was supposed to end after 4 cardinal points. The next guy isn't going to be considered, the master or whatever they end up doing with that. I don't know. If Daji was good, and Daji isn't, he isn't a master. So what is it? How's this going to work out? And so, again, as long as the transmission and cleaning exist, there's hope. There's hope that this can rebound. And also, all these people who've done the system, they're all coming back. We're all coming back. Like, there's going to be very few people liberated. And even if they are, they're probably coming back anyway, just to, move this thing forward. And when we come back, we'll be better. We'll be better. We'll just evolve more. And whatever time between, our death and our next life, there'll be, we'll be in a better shape, better spiritual, whatever, next life. So, there's hope in that sense. Like in that, in that direction, there's a lot of people who've taken their 3 sittings. A lot of people are connected. A lot of souls who want to do this in the future. A reduction of the negative souls as the population is reduced. And then a lack of material pleasures and distractions in a post-apocalyptic world. So there's some, things that will help enhance this system in the future, right? There was no master between the time that Lalaji died and 13 years later when Babaji was declared his successor. And that all happened with Babaji connecting with Lalaji in the etheric world. So, I suppose all that can happen again, and, I hope it does. It's, a strong possibility, because I believe that there's contingencies in a plan here. But he is saying in this that there's concerns that the system will be used in a way it's not supposed to. And that's happening right now. And so it didn't take very long. This message was in 2000, and 24 years later, not even that, because it started in 2015 and 16 when Daji took over. And so, not even 15 years after Babaji gave this message. It was even starting before that when Charji was, his physical health was so bad that they were already starting to manipulate the mission. But the reason I'm saying this is that Daji is the president and the, master of the system. Maybe he's not the master, but he's, that's what people consider him. He's the president, at least. And there's nothing that can be done about that. And, even if he was not, he died or whatever it is, or they found some legal way to strip him of that in some way. It would take I don't know, there'd be a mess to do that. But let's say they did that, because the court doesn't care about, the Brighter Mind scam is a criminal activity. But in India, it's just, so much, it just means nothing. And so they're not going to care about any of that stuff. Like, did he, violate any of the bylaws? And, I don't think on a legal level, they'd fight this thing out in the courts forever. And the courts are corrupt there and all that stuff. And so he has all this backing from political people and material. That's part of the thing. He's made it into a materialistic organization that gets its value from the award that he got, the Pudam Bosham Award and all that goofy stuff, and the celebrities and the politicians and being legitimized as an organization from external sources and not from the beauty of the inner world, right? But either way, the loss here is, number one, the ashrams. The ashrams are supposed to be safe havens in the upcoming upheavals, and I don't know how much of a fall off there has been in the spiritual condition there, but the ashrams aren't being utilized, and the kind of ashram, at least as far as I was there before, I think it's worse now, has fallen off. Kamlesh had bought a house in New Jersey when he was in New York, and to his credit, he spent a lot of money buying a building and donated it to the mission with another guy. They bought a house, and the house had like an auxiliary building, which became a meditation, like an ashram meditation hall. And then they bought a second house, and so the neighboring house. But the condition, I went there a couple times. It was nice, but it wasn't as good. Chargy hadn't been there. I don't think he would have been there, and it wasn't charged. It wasn't like it didn't have the spiritual energy of even, I think, the Sunderland meditation hall. And I don't know how these places are now, right? And I don't know how they're being utilized. I mean, there's just, it's a downtime. But the ashrams themselves, they were amazing. And like that Molina ashram, which is fallen into decay, and I don't know whether they've sold it or not. I don't know, what's going on with any of those things. But, their condition might be dissipating, and it could be brought back. But, again, it's a loss. And not having those ashrams makes it hard to really experience the Sajmark system in the way that needs to be experienced. And so that's a loss. The second thing is all the books, like all the copyrights are, the property of the books are with the mission, right? All the Chargy books. And so he's not republishing those. Those books are disappearing. And so all the knowledge with it and all the great things that were in those books. And so, as this unfolds, the apocalypse, some of that stuff's just going to be lost altogether. Like Chargy's whole epic amount of work is being lost because people are, all the people who know Chargy will die out, and he'll be forgotten, and that's just sad. That's a real loss. And then there's the all the preceptors that were made, and that they're like doing the wrong thing now. Following guy in the transmission. I mean, the transmission's being lost. The method and these things. But then there's the knowledge. Like Chargy built a structure of how to pull off these big gatherings and how to, build the ashram. Like he just was very efficient. And all these things that were there, the collective knowledge of how to operate this volunteer, this big volunteer mission, it'll be lost, right? So there's some loss here. And so, how to preserve it, how to, reclaim it and things. And, some things you just can't get back because they're, the buildings themselves, they're owned by, Heartfulness now, as are the books and things. So, there's that. But, with that, that's just, those things are gone, right? It's hard to, reconcile that for people, but it's just gone, and it is what it is. I've known this for a while. So, I am not going to change anything by making videos about it. Because, let's say the Abhyasis watch my videos, and this has already happened. So when we first started talking about this in the Journey series, there was a major amount of views that were there. 8,000, I already talked about this. And so there's not really that many real Abhyasis who they do this and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And they want to know everything about it, want to read the books, and they get into it. Like people who get into it and get into the literature and get into the philosophy, the technique, and to just become Sajmark nerds is very limited. Daji was one of those people. Like he was one of the, kind of really into it people, one of the top ones, right? And so, his falling and like now just not being into it is, that's a big part of this whole thing. But in terms of Abhyasis realizing Daji has failed, a lot of them were kind of bummed out and freaked out that he wasn't talking about Chargy. And there are some people who, then led them to see the Brighter Mind scam and all these things. But those people haven't been able to figure out what to do. And, there is only one solution, and that's you understand that Sajmark no longer exists in Heartfulness. like I said. So you have to go back and do Saj Marg, like you stay in Saj Marg and let them leave. And even though they're the legitimate owners of the organization, of the Saj Marg organization, that it's not, they're not doing it right. They're not honoring the commitments and the teachings and the essence of the system. They're doing something else, and you just allow them to leave, right? Like it's a divorce. They're just going to doing one of those things, right? Where you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing. And you have people like that all the time in your life. You just let them leave because you can't stop them. But those people who are struggling with Daji haven't come up with that, and they know about my gratefulness meditation, our gratefulness meditation, and they could do the same thing, but they're not doing that. So whatever their solution is, it's their solution. They're no longer my problem or my audience because there's a big separation between us, where I've realized you can connect to the divine master without the living master in the organization, and it's much better. And they haven't realized that yet. It's like the QBs or the flat earthers or any of the people who are in the truth community. We share a certain belief that the system's corrupted, but then what we do with it after that is quite different, and we're not on the same page. And then there are all the people who had some problems with what Daji's doing, but they have reconciled it, and they're just they're not dealing with it. They're pretending it didn't happen. They're suppressing it. They're repressing it. Whatever. And those people, they're kind of the worst of the worst because they know something's happened, but they refuse to deal with it. And there's people who are like in complete denial. But that's how they've all dealt with it, right? And so these people aren't my problem anymore. Like I don't have to, they're not my audience. I put the videos up and they are going to deal with it any way they deal with it, right? Like whatever. They either see the videos or not, that's on them and what they do with it. And, they're not doing anything. So, the reality of it is like I can wash my hands of this whole thing because there's nothing I can do. And I feel, good about all that, like in terms of accepting that because it was never really any solution because my videos weren't going to change this. Even if, 5,000 or more, how many Abhyasis there are, the real legitimate ones, realized what I was saying was true, and they just accepted. I mean, they realized it on their own, even if it had nothing to do with me, and they were doing something to, whatever it was, to preserve the Sage-Mark system. But the Daji, debacle itself and the people around him, it's going to have to run its course like a cancer, and that's a Sage-Mark teaching. There's things that you just have to allow to run their course, and so for me, I'm just dealing with the whole YouTube debacle, which I'm covering on my main channel. YouTube is squeezing my channel out and, so many other channels out, and they've changed their policies, and, I have to deal with that. And so I have, 2 channels that make content every other day. And then, I'll talk about some of the stuff in the Journey series. But any contact I have with Heartfulness, it's doing the positive. The Gratefulness Meditation channel, it has the positive in there. It's the, doing the Sage-Mark system the way it used to be done, the way it was supposed to be done. And not, bringing anything else into it. Just doing it, no relaxation exercises, none of these other things that Daji added to the system. No changing of the maxims, no, all of it. Just focusing on the simplicity of the system, which Daji has failed to do. And so that's there. And, the sad part about that is the Gratefulness Meditation channel gets about half the views of this channel. So whatever people find, that people want the drama and the negativity. And so, in terms of the rest of it, like in terms of me having all this information and being able to share it with people, there's no real audience for it. Like there's people in the, who are my regular viewers that find it interesting. But Abhyasis, already made their decision. So, for me, if I don't see something and I don't connect with it, I see some news story. This is how I've been wired now as a content creator. And so I see a news story and I have these thoughts. These thoughts come through me. I mean, channeling is, it's part of it's like channeling. I connect to, the divinity within me, and then there's this ideas that just flow through me. And some of them are of a higher nature, some of them are more mundane, some of them are comedic or whatever. But it's this whole thing that's just there, and I need to get it out, right? There's a great TED talk by Elizabeth, whatever her last name is, the woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, about this whole thing. The idea of a genius used to be like an etheric being. If you had a genius, you had like an etheric being that you were connected to and you were channeling. And she talked about how there's this woman who would get these inspirational sort of channeled poems. And one time the poem like blew through her room like wind, and she went out and physically like caught it. And this etheric, idea. And she pulled it in, but it was reversed, and she wrote the poem backwards, and then had to rewrite it. And so interesting stories. And now it's about this kind of thing, inspiration. That people get inspired to write music or a story or whatever it is, fictional material, or doing what I'm doing. And when this stuff flows through you, you want to take it down and get it out to the world, right? And that's what I do here. And so if I see something, I'll connect with whatever it is. The information will descend into my system, and the Sajmarg stuff with Daji, the Heartfulness stuff triggers me to do that. And so that's why I was able to make so much content about it. But it's meaningless content because there's no real audience for it. And it means that I have to connect with the Daji thing. And, it brings me down, like spiritually. And I just don't need to. I mean, we're like divorced, right? It's like there's nothing there. There's no relationship there. Me and the organization, right? And so I feel so much better when I don't connect with it. I don't think about it. And I could just think about, doing the gratefulness meditation, doing the Sajmarg meditation, making content about that helps people do that, and focusing on the positive. Sajmarg, you're always looking at what to do, not what not to do. And so that's, that's a big part of this whole thing. And so for those reasons, this channel is no longer necessary. I'll talk about it occasionally in the Journey series, but I don't want to dwell on it. Just, but I want to I'm going to get through the origin story stuff. And I'll cover whatever happens with Daji and the Chargy birthday thing when he, his hypocrisy and things like this. But without using the clips, I can't use the Sajmarg clips because they'll copyright it. It makes those videos, they've done me a favor because those videos are more important because you can demonstrate to people. But the thing is that the Abhyasis will never get it. I think they know, and they just are too weak to do anything about it. And they're trying to figure out what to do, and they don't know what to do. And so, they've just followed him away like a Pied Piper, leading them away from Sajmarg, and they're no longer doing Sajmarg, and they're no longer connected. And that, the more that they, go in that direction, the less, they connect to the divinity within them, and the less they connect with the true essence of the mission and things like this. But either way, they're not my problem, right? They're not my audience. We're not a community anymore, and I don't want anything to do with them, right? Because, like I said, they're the worst people to me. Because this thing is so special and so important, and they've failed to make the right decision. Again, that's between them and God, but that's the way I see it. Because obviously there's been such a drop off in Daji, right? And that's for them to figure out how to connect to the divinity within them, and through the Sajmarg system, despite Daji. And I don't know what they're doing or what they're not doing. But either way, so this is like I said, my final video on this subject here. I'll probably cover the stuff with Chargy's birthday on the Journey series. I'll make just a standalone video, and I don't know where I'll put that, but not here probably, because again, this is going to be just a backup channel. Anyway, so like I said, I feel really good about it. I slept really well, and I had good sets on this morning. And I'm going to get the prayer video up on the other channel, and it's just a good thing. I was going to end the thing there. I was going to end the video here, but there's one more thing I want to add. I it's been kind of one of the more painful realizations is there isn't really that many true Abiyasis, and I don't mean how good they are as people or even how devoted they are. I mean the people who understand what this is and they get it. Like, and they might not embrace it as much as they should, but they really appreciate what this is. And I used to think it was a difference between people who could feel the transmission or not. People who, my brother didn't feel the transmission, but I think he was kind of a real Abiyasi just because of his commitment. But it was maybe, a little bit artificial because he didn't really feel the transmission. I can't say. It's up to each person, but this thing with Daji has exposed that there's not that many real Abiyasis because a lot of them don't know the literature and don't know what he's doing is wrong because they don't know the whole philosophy. They didn't read the books. And they might like the transmission and the cleaning, but they're still doing their ritualistic practices. Many of them still consider themselves Hindu, and they're not, real, never adjusted to being real Abiyasis. Babaji and Charji told people, stop doing your rituals, stop doing your mantras. It's not a part of this thing. But, there were so few Americans that did this system. And I saw this coming years and years ago when when the whispers came out. And I could see that it was just becoming an Indian, Indians mostly from India who were here in America, and they were taking all the positions and they were running the mission and they decided what kind of food to eat. And Americans were disappearing. And it was just these old boomer hippies. And lots of them struggled with the whole Chargy discipline anyway. And so, Daji coming in and, these people are liberal and they let their political views really, never fully embrace Chargy's teachings and things like that. So, it was, the mission here was a joke, and the mission was always kind of a joke. And it was getting worse, and Chargy said, to the Indian people that you've wrecked the American mission. But then he appointed all Indians as the people who were, in charge of the administrative positions. And I saw it coming when I knew that the system was going to collapse. And when the American economy goes down, all these people go back to India. Because if you stayed with or knew these people, and they're nice people, like I stayed at some of their houses, I'm not slamming the people themselves, but they never adjusted to American life, but their kids did. So it's this weird thing where their kids are American and the kids want nothing to do with India, and most of them, and nothing to do with their, the whole thing. But, Saj Marg, they had nothing to do with that. And so that's where the fall off is. Because the Indians who grew up here, who were Americanized, they would help transform this mission, and they could bring in, other people and make, Americans, regular Americans who are, grew up here and are, American in their orientation to the world, make them feel more comfortable. But the kids didn't want to do that. They didn't want anything to do with this, right? And they're rejecting their culture like, American kids do. This is what Americans, you have your immigrants, the people immigrate from whatever country, and they bring their old world into it, and they have like little Italy and little, little Ireland or whatever it is, little China, these things like the Chinatown, whatever it is. And they keep their culture, and there's this section of, where that food is eaten in shops and things that cater to those people. And then their kids don't want any part of that. They want to become Americans because they feel, they go to school with other Americans and they don't want to feel different. And they embrace the American culture. But, in the Sajmark system, that never happened. And so when the economy, craters here, those people go back to India. And, Daji, who initially said that everyone should go to these different countries, he's not traveling. And so those people are already going back to India. They're, buying property at Kana and these things. And so the American mission, before this, when I realized this was going to happen, I knew that we needed a community from doing the homesteading. And there was no one to do it with. There's plenty of Christians who had community and will be able to figure out a community when the system collapses, right? They have, built into their There's the millions of practitioners, and there's other groups of people that can come together, but not so many Abiyasis. And all the Indians were going to leave, and they weren't really into it. And so, there wasn't anything for us here in America, real Abiyasis. But now I see there's not really that many real Abiyasis that get what this is about, understand the literature. Because if they did, they would reject what Daji's doing, because it's so obvious that he's not, keeping with it. The purity of the system. And so I've realized there's so few people. I mean, people who can even feel the transmission, and even fewer people who really dive into it and understand how important this is. And even fewer people can sustain that commitment. And so it's just a handful of people, really. I mean, like 100. Like, I mean, it's not that many people. And even that, because those people have all gone along with Daji. And so, like, it's right now humanity's kind of failed this original first, phase one of the Sajmark system. This is the end of phase one with Daji, and we'll see what happens later, and whatever. I mean, maybe we will in this life, probably not so much. But there's no real solutions here, right? Other than just doing what we're doing with gratefulness and keeping it going. And I'm happy to do it. Like, I've just, I feel good about it, as long as I'm not, aware of the, I don't have to be reminded of what's going on with Daji. I don't need any more brighter mind stuff. I don't need any of the, unless something significant happens, something big. And if people find out about it, sure, go ahead and tell me. Like some big thing, like not some little tiny thing, something big, like really big. Something new, something big, whatever. Or some development in the story, like, something happens where some, institution goes after him for, brighter minds or whatever it is. His health fails, whatever it might be. But even that, so. But as far as I'm concerned, it's this, the real Abiyasis can either do gratefulness meditation or connect directly themselves, whatever it is. And the rest of the people are, they're just, not my concern. I don't care about them. I have no interest in them. And, they're going to do whatever they're going to do. It's just like sheeple. It's like, sheeple on steroids. There's plenty of information and stuff out there for sheeple, but they're not my audience or my concern. I kind of knew this would go this way anyway, but you still have to try. You still have to do the work. One of the blessings here for me, Charji wrote this to me personally, but he said it over and over. You do the work and leave the results to God, right? Leave the results to the Divine Master. The work is yours and the results are God's. And it's been a real saving grace for me, with all this stuff, with the YouTube things. And, if I get into what the results are, how many subscribers, right now I'm having a monetary issue, right? But, I don't feel bitter or feel like, wow, my channel deserves more, or I deserve a bigger audience, or the Abiyasi should have listened to me. None of that, right? Like, I just do what I'm supposed to do. And I did it. I created this channel. I put the information out there. And it became obvious that, a few people it affected. 2 people, like 2, maybe over a period of time, 3 or 4 people have come forward. But none of them are doing gratefulness, I don't think. So, in reality, it helped them reconcile the thing with Daji, but they're still got to figure out whatever they're going to do, So, again, that's up to them. It's not my problem. I'm not bummed by it. Like, they have their own path and their own choices to make. And so, I had to make the videos. I had to make this channel. I had to put the information out there because, people can access it, and then they're going to do with it. They're going to react whatever they react. And, obviously there's no audience for it, like not a real audience who, other than people are into the drama of the things, or some people are doing gratefulness meditation, but they don't need this, right? Like, they already heard the story. Their opinion of Daji's already formed, and they're, whatever. And new people, like, if they fall for Daji and this thing, then they're not quality people, right? Like, they're not real potential Abiyasis. Like, Daji's going to maybe, people who, can't imagine anybody getting into Daji and the whole thing the way it is now. And, if they do, that's on them, right? But my videos these people are Indian. They're not going to understand what I'm, doing here. And so they're not, without the transmission. It was hard enough to stay doing Sajmarg with transmission and cleaning. and with a great spiritual master. I mean, it was hard to get people to stay. It was hard to get them to try it. So, like, they're, again, I'm not here to, to put a red flag or a buoy warning people away from dodgy, because, they should be all able to figure it out themselves. If they can't, that's on them, right? And so, but the work had to be done, and the results are there. And I've accepted them, and, it's just better for me to move on. There's no reason to keep on putting out content here, because, I'm spread too thin, and there's no real reason for it. So anywho, that's it. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting from the Apocalypse. And the Ascension, everyone have a blessed day, and be grateful.